Hello and welcome back to the Wisdom in Christ podcast. I'm here with my mother today, and it should be a lot of fun. So super excited about today's podcast. After I did my podcast with Donovan, with Caleb, and with Benjamin, I thought, you know what? I need to have my mom come on here because you were listening to all those episodes, and you were like, wow, I love this podcast.
Yep. It was awesome. You did a good job.
You're like the greatest supporter of the podcast so far.
Well, it's fun to watch.
Yeah?
It's fun to see the success of my children and listen to their story and how they tell it. And yeah, it's really interesting.
So speaking of your children, you decided to do homeschooling throughout the process of raising your kids. Yeah. So what is the story behind that? How did you get into homeschooling? You know, what's the story?
Okay. So I had not any negative preconceived ideas about homeschooling. I always had a positive, open mind about it, partly because of my experience with it. So my brother, I have an older brother that homeschooled. Your Uncle Brad and his wife, they homeschooled their kids. And so they always talked positively about it. So as we started having our family, Dad and I, we actually talked a little bit about it even before any of our kids were old enough to start school. And we talked a little bit about homeschool, but we didn't get real serious about it at the time. I really wanted to do it. I felt like it would be better than sending him to public school. So, but Dad, he had more of a negative preconceived idea, I think, about homeschooling. So his interactions and his, I don't know quite the right word, but his perceived ideas about it were more negative. And his experience with homeschool families that he knew was more of a negative experience with it. So he was kind of not sure about it, where I was really open to it. But as our oldest son, Benjamin, who's been on the podcast, as he started getting to the age of school, of going to school, we kind of talked about it and ended up deciding not to do it at that time. We went ahead and put him into school, regular school. And there were things that I didn't really like about that, but then, there wasn't any real big negative things that were happening. So we just kept it up. So as the other kids started getting to that age, we sent our daughter Melissa, who's second after Benjamin, and then we also sent our son Donovan to kindergarten. Things were going okay. There were a few problems here and there, and I still always in the back of my mind, I kind of had that idea to homeschool. And I think I would, if I remember correctly, I think we would talk about it before the school started. A lot of the time Dad and I would talk a little bit about it, and we just ended up still sending him every year, So then when Benjamin was in 5th grade and Melissa was in 3rd grade and Donovan was in 1st grade, some more serious problems started happening with him in public school. Donovan was really struggling. I was not happy with his teacher. I had some concerns with her and the way that she was treating her students. And so I really started to bring up that idea of homeschool again. I was thinking about it. I had friends who were homeschooling who were having good success with it. My brother was still really successful with it. But then some serious things were going on in Donovan's class. He was in 1st grade. I had some problems with the teacher. So I decided I would go in and talk with the principal. And I had a meeting with the principal about the idea. My first idea was I just need to change teachers. We just need to get a different teacher for him and move him into a different class. And the principal was not open to that at all. They don't like to switch teachers. So he just said, why don't you visit the classroom? Go into the classroom, watch what's going on in the classroom, and go there for a couple of days and kind of see how you're feeling after you do that. So I did. So I went in and I sat in the classroom, and I was not happy with it at all. I felt like the teacher just didn't have control of her classroom. She was very negative. She raised her voice a lot of the children, and she was very threatening to them, very demeaning to them, And I know not all teachers that are this way. In fact, we had some experiences with some really amazing teachers that teach in the public school system. But this particular teacher was a problem. And as I was in that classroom, I don't remember if it was the first day I went or the second day, I was sitting in the classroom and I just had a very strong, distinct, inspirational feeling. It was more of a thought that came to my mind, I'm sure through the Holy Ghost, as I was watching what was going on. And the thought was, Donovan will never do well in this situation. He won't do well. And so, because like I said, my initial thought was, can I just switch him to a different teacher? But the Spirit told me that wouldn't fix the problem. And so it was strong enough. I was told, I knew it. I could not deny it. And so I actually went straight from the classroom to my husband's work and talked to him, Dad's work, and talked to him about homeschooling. He said, go home and call this person. We had friends that did it. So I called one of my friends and talked to her about it. And, he was really open to pulling Donovan out. But as I got talking with my friends, I was like, oh, I just think we should pull them all out, So this was about halfway through or partway through the school year that all this was happening. And so as soon as I started talking with Dad again about homeschooling all the children, that he kind of pulled back like, well, wait a minute. I don't know about that. I don't know if we want to do all of them. But to me, it seemed logical. Why have one why have one at home where I'm working with them and having to work with the other two at public school? Just really for scheduling, too. And also just there were some problems with Benjamin in the 5th grade center, too. So now at the time, the Uinta School District here, they had things set up really different. They had divided the schools to where even though my children were all still in grade school, they were all in different schools all around all around Vernal. So they were not even in the same school. All three of them were in different buildings all around Vernal because they had divided up all of the buildings, and they had taken 2 of the school buildings and put kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade in 2 of them. And then they had taken another 2 of the buildings and put 3rd and 4th grade students in those 2 schools. And then all of the 5th graders met in one building, and they called it the 5th grade center. So Benjamin was in a school, the 5th grade center. Melissa was in a different building, and Donovan was in a different building. So they were scattered all over, and busing was crazy, took longer to get to school, that the routes were all messed up. So that was something I did not like that the district had done. Anyway, but we ended up, Dad and I, talking a lot about it. He kind of struggled with the idea of pulling everybody out, but I pretty much was, basically, I just knew it needed to happen. And so I just kept talking. We just kept having discussions until we did agree on it together. And, if a lot of the time, Dad, when he talks about the story, I would tell him, I had a spiritual confirmation. This is what we're supposed to do. And he kept telling me, well, I haven't had that spiritual confirmation. Why haven't I gotten it? And so that was where we kind of were struggling with being together on this decision. And it was a big decision. And so we kept having discussions. I remember over Christmas break, we pretty much talked about it the whole Christmas break, off and on, whether we should send him back. And finally, Dad decided that he would support me in the decision that I felt so strongly about. And what when you ask him about this story, he'll tell you that he never really felt like he got a confirmation we were supposed to homeschool at the time. But what the Spirit told Dad was, trust your wife. That was his answer. And so that's what he did.
I bet husbands get that one a lot.
I don't know, but that's
Just
what.
trust your wife.
Yeah. And so that's when it started. We did not send them back after the Christmas break. We kept them home, and it was the right thing to do. Donovan needed movement while he was learning. That's what I realize now. In fact, remembering the podcast, it almost seems like he might have mentioned that he's hyperactive. Maybe if I had taken him into a doctor, he may have been diagnosed as ADD or hyperactive or something. We never did that, but he needed movement. And so being in a classroom all day long, he did okay in kindergarten. That was a half a day. And besides, his kindergarten teacher was amazing. She was awesome. She loved the kids. They did a lot of things. Anyway, so her name was Mrs. Stagg, and Melissa had her too for a kindergarten teacher. And she was absolutely amazing. Loved her. Yeah, when it went to all day long, for Donovan all day, it became more of a problem. And he needed movement. He needed individual attention, and he needed movement. And he was not going to get that in the public school system. So
how did you feel like it transformed him? Did you see a change in Donovan really fast when you started homeschooling? What was it kind of like?
Well, I saw a change in his... Yeah, I think there were changes that were more fast, but then there were changes that took a long time because unfortunately what happens with kids, I think, is that public school can very often give kids a negative idea of education, of school. School is not fun. That learning is not fun. The only fun thing about school is going and seeing your friends in recess, and I don't know if all kids feel that way, but I wanted our children to, all of you guys, to have a love of learning, to love to learn. And the years that the older kids spent in school, even though it was only a few years, they already had that lens of, I hate school, I don't like school. And so you have to kind of work with that and try to re-teach them that actually school learning, is fun, love learning. And that transition it took time to make that transition, I think, for them to look at schooling like it was fun. And so we tried to do a lot of things. We tried to, I got a lot of advice from friends, and I went to homeschool conventions, to classes with suggestions and, on how to have time to do all the laundry and the housework and homeschool. And because when your kids are home all day, you have a perpetual things going on, school all over the kitchen table and your foods and snacks. And so you have to juggle all that. And so I went to classes for suggestions. And one of the things that really stuck with me was not to public school at home, to make it a real homeschool, And so a lot of the things and of course, we did a lot of different things. We tried a lot of different ideas. Probably the one thing we did, and we did consistently, that I started right from the beginning, was I read to you guys. I read you books. We could probably do an entire podcast listing all of the books that I read to you and reread as the younger kids got older, all sorts of series of books, classic books. And, I read to you guys every day, and we did that no matter what, and we didn't have you divided so much in classes. The first year I used some books that were grade school or, were class oriented, like 5th grade or 3rd or whatever. But I kind of moved away from that too. And just, you remember we had our group study, right? Remember that? And we all just we were all together, and we just read stuff, and we talked about it, and then for individually, we worked on your math skills and your reading skills individually, as we could. But we did our science stuff together, little science experiments, and I don't know. You probably remember us reading in like the highlights magazines and the Kids Discover, and anyway, we had a lot of those things as supplement. But the other thing that we did a lot was we used the church magazines a lot in our homeschool. I would read to you guys from them, The Friend and The New Era, mostly,
Yeah, I remember that. I remember group study a lot because it was one of those times in the day where we could listen to you reading. So our other schoolwork was hands-on. We would, solve the math problem, practice piano. But group study I really liked because we could just kind of sit down on the couch and, braid your hair or whatever and listen
in our
as
pajamas
you read. Yeah,
sometimes.
we didn't have to do anything crazy hands-on,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I didn't worry about age in that. We were all together. It wasn't like we're separated in grades. In fact, you guys hardly knew what grade you were in. We used to have to, if people asked you, we'd have to try to think, let's see, what grade is, he's this old, what grade would he be in?
Well, people ask me to this day when I graduated high school, like when I, had my high school graduation, because they think that I just went through the normal public school system.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I know that I have a GED and a homeschool high school diploma.
Right.
Yeah. And so I know I graduated high school, but like what year I graduated isn't like something I care about.
You were actually one of the younger ones. You were taking the test at about 16. You were almost 17. Yeah, when you did it. But yeah, I was trying to help you guys love learning because it doesn't end, right? You don't know when you graduated because you didn't stop learning, right? We don't end at graduation, right? We continue to learn our entire lives, and so I believe that those years from the time you're born till you start to reach, the age where you're going to start being way more and more independent and going out on your own, 18 years old or whatever. That's just the very beginning. That's where you learn how much you love to learn, and then as you go through your whole life, you're still learning, you're still reading,
Because a lot of people think that graduation point is the end.
No.
In their minds they think, oh, I'm graduated, I'll never pick up a book again in my life. A lot of people don't.
I hope not.
I know it's sad to hear that, right? But it is true that a lot of people graduate high school and they don't continue learning.
Yeah.
Because they only were learning in some cases because it was what they were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you wanted to encourage a true love for learning so that it's something that we would learn or that we'd be happy about doing for the rest of our lives.
Right. Exactly.
Because it's not a chore.
Yeah.
It's
because
a joy of life.
Exactly. Yeah. It brings you joy. You continue learning. So, and we didn't, when Benjamin went to college, he actually started taking college classes at 16. And then he may have mentioned this in the podcast. He ended up getting his associate's degree through Utah State University at 18. So I hadn't started doing the actual homeschool diplomas that we all have now at that point yet. But I learned about them. I had some friends that had done them. And so that's when I started looking into having official homeschool diplomas that I could give you guys as you graduated, from homeschool, which, graduating it's a turning point, or it's I believe it's important enough to recognize that achievement. But like you said, it's still a beginning. It's almost a starting point for how you're going to view the continued learning you'll do for your entire life. And so we did remember, we all got together and started trying to decide on a name for our homeschool, right? Because I needed a name to put on the diplomas. And we ended up deciding on Cobble Rock Academy. And then we actually had shirts, because we had, people always ask, well, where do you go to school? What's your school? And so I wanted my children to have an answer so they could say Cobble Rock Academy. And people, well, where's that? Well, that's our homeschool, But we did shirts with we did a logo, we had shirts, we had jackets. And so it became kind of a, it was an identity a little bit, Cobble Rock Academy. And our homeschool was based on Jesus Christ. That name is actually based on Jesus Christ. And our logo emphasized the word rock, because Jesus Christ is our rock, right? He's our foundation. And we also had a scripture that goes along with that. It's the scripture that's in Helaman, where it talks about building our building our foundation on the rock of our Redeemer, which is Christ the Lord, so that when we have when Satan throws his fiery darts, we'll be firm and we will stand, right? We won't fall, because we're built upon the rock of our Redeemer. And that is the scripture that is on our Cobble Rock Academy sign that we have in front of our door. And so anyway, that was the whole thing behind that, was to have Jesus Christ be the center of our homeschool. And that's why we named it Cobble Rock Academy. All of my children are out on their own now. You're doing things, you've grown up. We're not technically doing homeschool, right? But I look at it still like Cobble Rock Academy, still going strong. Every morning I get up, and after I've done my exercise routine, I have all my books out on the table, right? I'm still in Cobble Rock Academy. I'm still studying my scriptures, and I'm studying great books and reading out of them. And, so it still has a student. So
I think everybody's students for life. I think when it comes to Cobble Rock Academy.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Well, that's awesome, Mom. So it was probably one of the best feelings ever to get that revelation, and then to kind of trust it, and then to see the fruition of it over time.
Right.
All the blessings that came from listening to that and not ignoring that. So would you describe that as being a really cool experience? Like, what was it like to see, that revelation fulfilled?
Yeah, that it's a good feeling. It was part of what helped me define my mission. We all have a mission. And I always knew I wanted to be a mom, and I knew I wanted to be home with my children. And so, that was the mission that I started out with. I wanted to be home. I wanted to be with my children at home. And as we made this decision to homeschool, and like you said, as I had this strong, it was just so strong and so powerful. It was part of that identifying of what my mission was. My mission was to homeschool, to be the teacher for my children, and I took it very seriously. And it wasn't always easy, In fact, it was very frequently very hard. Children don't do what you want them to do, right? But it was worth it. And also just, I guess, to kind of finish the story of Dad and how things went with him, is that over time he was totally converted. He still had times where he questioned and was wondering, but as the kids started to grow and he saw their progress and them accomplishing their goals, you guys all accomplishing your goals that you had, he's completely converted to it, and he can see how, what a good decision it was. And, he didn't even know it, but he was the best homeschool dad ever. It's just part of how he is. His personality as a homeschool dad.
Yeah,
I mean, I can remember times on Thanksgiving when he's up there at the counter and later on, and he's picking the chicken off the bones of the turkey. And he's like, "Come here, you guys, look at this bone. And he's teaching you the anatomy of this turkey, look, this is, and it just everything, he would just came naturally to teach you guys things. And so, without even really realizing it, he was the perfect homeschool dad. He was always teaching you guys. If there was a problem with the car, what would he do? Come here, you guys, look. See this? This is such, I don't know anything about cars, but he'd take you and teach you, right? This is what's happening here. It just came naturally to me.
Or how to repair the garage roof.
Yeah.
We did that for part of a homeschool day, just real life stuff. And in that kind of environment, homeschooling kind of creates an environment where normal and natural ways for things to be taught instead of trying to force or just teaching concepts. Mm-hmm. You're teaching in normal and natural ways a lot of times.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that came naturally to Dad, and he would do it with things in repairs in the house too. If there was, I think he's taught all you boys how to fix the float in the toilet, and just these little plumbing jobs. If the sink isn't draining fast enough, right? He taught you, pull you in there. Look, you pull this out and you clean it out, and
Well, I was homeschooled my whole life except for that little high school period.
Right.
So when I grew up, I remember Dad teaching me about electronics, how to use tools, right? How to safely use saws.
Right, yeah.
Like the little saws for making my own stuff out in the shop.
Right.
He showed hands-on so many things to me. And so my idea of learning was hands-on and straight from my own father who I trusted, and
exactly,
it really helped me a lot. So
and I was public schooled, and then I did end up, before Donovan was born, and he's our third child, I ended up finishing my associate's degree through Utah State University. But I always felt like if there was something you guys wanted to learn that I didn't feel comfortable teaching you, that there was resources available out there that I could go to, outsource it. And, we had a lot of things like that happened. Benjamin, through a merit badge, through scouting, he just got on fire with drafting. He wanted to learn drafting. And so I figured out how to get him into the technical school here in Vernal that he could take drafting from Mr. Reese, and then he loved art. And so we let him go in. He went into the high school and took an art class, and so there were things that you guys wanted to learn, but there's available sources or places, where I could get that help. So you don't have to feel like you have to know it all, because there's just always places you can go in the community to get help with the things that your children are interested in, and that's what we would do. And so that's why some of them went in to take classes at the high school, was just because there were things there that they could learn that I didn't feel like I was proficient enough to teach them. And it worked out great. Then, of course, seminary. You guys all started seminary and went to seminary through the high school, and I think you started actually at the junior high seminary, but they don't even have that anymore. They've gone all up the high school. So so we use the sources out there. Yeah.
So when you started homeschooling, you probably had a lot of different fears or just things people have said, society, the world.
Right.
But you had the confirmation that it was the right thing to do. So did you just have to hold on to that? Like, what was it like?
Oh, yeah.
that difference, right? You've got the world telling you one thing and then what's inside of you telling you another thing.
Yeah. There was no way I never had a feeling that I needed to quit homeschooling. And that feeling to continue homeschooling was strong. I never even, the thought never even occurred to me that I would even put you back in as far as like full time, And I was very much only open to high school classes, pretty much, because I felt like by the time you're about that age, you're going to go in there, you're going to see what's going on in high school and all of that, But I felt like by that time, you're probably going to be old enough that you can handle whatever's happening and we can talk about things that go on that we don't agree with. But I was completely firm in my resolve to continue, no matter how hard it got. And I took a lot of classes. I went to a lot of different classes. Vernal had a whole community of homeschoolers, and we did things together. We supported each other. They did conventions here where they would bring in people to come in and speak to us and do classes to help us do better, help us, give us ideas on how we could do the best that we possibly could. And ultimately, we got to decide, we could decide as moms that were homeschooling, we would decide what we felt was best for our children and their individual needs and what worked best. And so there were different times when we did different things and we tried some different things. But like I said, the consistent thing that we did was we made sure we did our group study where I would read to you guys and we would learn together. I learned a lot homeschooling. If you want to learn something, teach it. Because you prepare yourself. And I remember, too, as we started getting technology a little more, getting the internet and stuff. And we didn't have like the smartphones and stuff, but I remember some of you guys started getting the little iPods where you could connect to the internet. And I can remember with you younger kids, a time or two where we were doing group study and we came upon a question that we had. And my first thoughts back then were, okay, we need to get a book on this. We need to find the information on this. And you'd be like, oh, here, let me just Google this. And in an instant, we'd have the answer. And it was like, this is awesome. Here we are sitting here.
You're like, see, I don't need to have some specialized knowledge. I can,
We could answer if we were reading in a book and came on a word that we're like, we're not exactly sure the meaning of this word, let's look it up. There we had an iPod or something and we could just write just like that, So it was amazing. So we would use, and as the younger kids got older, we used the internet a lot, but we still had our library days. We went to the library, we checked out books and, Dad used to tease you guys that when you wanted to know something, you would ask for the book. And when he wanted to know something, he wanted to watch the movie. We had to kind of retrain him a little bit for how valuable books are and reading and stuff. So
you mentioned how when you get to high school age, kids are a little bit more ready to be able to go into that world, and you're able to have conversations with them. We don't believe this. We don't believe that. These things are being talked about. Well, when you pulled your kids out of school, almost none of the stuff that's happening today is happening.
Yeah.
And today, homeschooling's becoming a bigger thing. The amount of homeschoolers has went up significantly since coronavirus, massive percentage of increase in homeschool families. And there's a lot of stuff being taught in schools that aren't stuff that you agree with, that you don't want your kids to learn.
Right.
So can you see now that the motivation is increasing because of the things going on in the world for homeschooling to be a bigger thing?
Yeah. And I completely agree with the fact that, homeschooling is a place where you can be safe to to teach their children the things that you want them to know and about themselves, where the things that are going on in schools now are pretty scary in a lot of ways. And I'm blessed right now to where, your older siblings that have children are homeschooling right now, and so that's, that's something that I can be very thankful for. But yeah, when they're, I think with public school, unfortunately, the way that it's set up has a tendency to have children come out with their kind of two scenarios. I don't want to totally say that they're the only categories, but very frequently what you'll see is children go through the public school system and they'll come out with no self-esteem. They'll come out feeling like they're stupid. They don't, because somehow in the system they just didn't thrive, or they might come out with a sense of pride that they're really smart and they know a lot, because maybe they were able to manipulate the system in such a way that they always got the best grades. And however, and to me, either one of those scenarios is a good thing. You want, at home, I believe that's a place where you can give children the foundation of who they are, children of God, and they can grow up with a confidence in their abilities and also a realization that they still have a lot to learn. There's just an infinite amount of things to learn out there. You don't have it all figured out. Yeah, I think it gives them an environment where they can be more confident in themselves. And as we some of the things that we see out there in the world today are identity issues, right? There's huge things going on about identity issues, and it is filtering down even into the really young children. Like, you get to choose now whether you're a boy or a girl, or so those are serious things with identity, and we know it's Satan trying to confuse children, confuse even adults, confuse everybody. And of course, we have the knowledge through direct revelation and through the doctrine in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that gender is eternal. We have that doctrine and that knowledge, and so we can teach that to our children, and just knowing they're children of God, that's so important.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. I mean, if you don't know that and you start to go through life and bad things happen, you might start to base your identity on those events that happened, or maybe you got bullied, in school. So now your identity is not a child of God. You view yourself as somebody that is lesser than other people, or, and so getting that truth and that knowledge of who you are at a very young age is like armor against the world and all the craziness that's out there,
And part of our group study that we did was we started out with our devotional, and we had prayer and we had scripture, and we talked about we talked about spiritual things. I would rather put it that way. And we memorized a lot of things too. We used to memorize scripture, and so we tried to, like I said earlier, we tried to base our homeschool on the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our younger kids, I used a method for teaching them to read where you literally use the Book of Mormon to learn to read. So I was trying to remember if we used that method with you or not, but I know for sure we used it with Caleb and Hannah, where it's called Learning How to Read Using the Book of Mormon. That was the method we used. And I used to teach the children that the importance of learning to read and to write was just so that we could read our scriptures, right? Because Heavenly Father has taught us we need to read our scriptures, and we can't read our scriptures if we don't know how to read. So that was part of the motivation. And learning to write was so we can keep records. We can write in our journals and keep a record. That's what Heavenly Father wants us to do. And so you guys probably remember us. We wrote in our journals every day, remember? And before the younger kids could actually write, I would just let them tell me what they wanted to write in their journal. So I would write it for them, So we did a lot of that. And then, of course, you guys know the music. Music was pretty much a homeschool
super central, yeah.
That was part of the Anderson. The Cobble Rock Academy was music. So piano was the base, and everyone was required to learn the piano, and then you branched off to other things, guitar and those things that you guys liked to do. So
you really knew how to make sure we got our piano practiced because we couldn't play the Nintendo until we got our piano practiced. And because of that one thing, now every single one of your kids knows how to play the piano, and a lot of times a second instrument as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned the Book of Mormon as a way to learn how to read, because in church last week, a guy gave a talk and he explained that both of his kids learned how to read in extremely short periods of time because they used the Book of Mormon as a way. And their teachers had tried to get them to read other books and tried to get them to learn how to read. And these kids just had the worst grades, reading grades in school. Just the worst of, really low grades, and not out of everybody in school, but in the school they were going to, they had low grades, right? So he said that they started reading the Book of Mormon, and his one kid, I think it was his daughter, learned how to read in a month. She can read really big words and stuff because of the Book of Mormon, and their grades went up in a single month. Their grades went up in school in their reading areas, to the top, from the bottom to the top. Yeah. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a neat story. Yeah. One of the things that we started doing even before we were homeschooling, we started reading every night in the Book of Mormon as a family. And I can remember times when I thought, when I would have the book, I would usually read, especially if Dad was working late, and I would think, and I'd be reading. I always felt like it was important to read straight from the Book of Mormon, the actual Book of Mormon, out loud, not. I don't see anything wrong with the simplified children's stories, but I wanted to have some time at least where we read directly from the Book of Mormon using the actual Book of Mormon. And so I can remember times that when Benjamin probably was only 4 or 5, and little kids, and I would let him. Sometimes we'd get out the blocks so they could build blocks while I was reading. Something to do with their hands. And I remember thinking, well, I don't think they're getting anything out of this, but at least I'm for sure getting some of the Book of Mormon read, to myself. But I would read out loud to them. But then, all of a sudden, sometimes when I would be reading, Benjamin, even when he was little, he would all of a sudden look up at me and ask a question or tell me, something about Nephi, and I would be like, oh, wait a minute, I think he's listening to this, actually. You didn't know it because they'd just be down there building their blocks or whatever, but he was soaking in. They were soaking in more than you actually thought. But we still read every night in the Book of Mormon. We started it early on in our marriage, and we're still doing it. So very important. Yeah, there was a whole program, and the program came with flashcards that was called Learning to Read Using the Book of Mormon, and it used phonics as well. And I can remember Caleb asking me, Mom, he was trying to sound out the word Nephi, and I told him that P and H make the F sound, like F, and he's like, well, why didn't they just use F, Mom?
You're like, well,
the logic of a child. Yeah. I don't know, but that's
you're like, go grab the Spanish Book of Mormon, because I'm pretty sure it is Nefi or so.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know. I know I've seen one of them where they spell it with an F in one of the languages.
Yeah.
Because they have different phonics.
It was a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question.
And I just said, well, Yeah, that would
English.
be easier, but this is what it is. P and H makes that sound.
That would be
sometimes
easier, son, but you grew up learning English.
Yeah, so it was a good thing. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I am super thankful for you, Mom, and I appreciate you in my life. And you have done an amazing job homeschooling your kids and teaching us to love learning and fall in love with learning. And still to this day, every day I wake up and learning things brings me probably more joy than anything. So, and I can say without a doubt that that's because you listened to the Spirit and you followed the Spirit. And then you decided to raise your kids in the way the Spirit was telling you to.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I always wanted to do, So, and that's what I want. That's what I try to do is listen to the Spirit, and that's the most important thing, as parents, I think, is to listen to the Spirit and let the Spirit guide you. And then you don't have to fear. You don't have to fear what's happening all around you. The Spirit's there to guide you and let you know. And as long as you follow that, then, things will be okay.
Yep, that's true. You can't go wrong.
Right.
Following God and listening to the Spirit. So what books are you reading right now?
Well, let's see. Right now, I'm listening on Audible. I'm listening to the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I finished The Hobbit, which I have previously read before, and I'm listening to the first book in the trilogy for the Lord of the Rings, and for some reason, the title of that has left me right now. And then as far as reading, I love to study nutrition. That's just one of my things. And I'm reading a book called The Habits of Health for probably the second or third time. And then I'm reading President Nelson's book, The Heart of the Matter. And I'm reading a book by Gerald Lund called, it's a book on Revelation. I think it's kind of a longer title. Anyway, it's a book on personal revelation that I think it's called Hearing the Voice of the Lord. And then I have been, since Caleb started showing the interest in the Orthodox Church, I borrowed a couple of books from him just to see what their beliefs are. So I've kind of been reading through those so I can have an understanding of the things that he's been looking into. And I think right now that's pretty. What I do is I read a little bit in all of them. Of course, I'm reading in the Book of Mormon and following the Come Follow Me lessons, and so. That's
I see every day you have a big pile of books about this high every time I see you.
Yeah, so. And I especially with the nonfiction books, I'm not too worried about just plowing through them. I'm okay to read just a little bit out of them every day and really try to kind of internalize what I'm reading, But they're really good. They're really good books. So, and I developed a love for reading. I think I was telling you this a while back, but at a young age, and I started reading, and basically I've never stopped. I was probably about 13 when I just really got into books and I just wanted to read all the time, and my mom she had a huge library of books, and I was like, well, I'm looking for good books to read. And she opened up her cupboards and said, well, here you go. There's all these books. And I just started reading them. I always had the most pages in my English class read. And so, and over the years I've read a lot of classics. I absolutely love Uncle Tom's Cabin. I think it's one of the most well-written books out there. It's got to be one of my top favorites. I also love there's a book called David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, and I love that book. I know it's not the most popular he's done. I know A Tale of Two Cities and Great Expectations probably are more popular than David Copperfield, but that one's my personal favorite of his. So, and I've read all of Jane Austen, multiple times.
The Work and the Glory.
The Work and the Glory. Yeah, I've done a lot of those.
Hundreds and hundreds of books throughout your life. Hundreds.
Oh, yeah. And some of
that's
them
a
I've
small
reread.
number. That's way lowballing it.
I can't count them, but yeah, I love to read and I've never stopped reading. So I used to read while I was nursing babies. I used to read while I was cooking dinner, especially when I couldn't put a book down. I'd be reading and stirring the hamburger, and when I could, and just get it in anytime I could. Yeah, I love it.
Well, when you got a bunch of kids running around and you're cooking dinner and teaching school and doing laundry and keeping the house clean and all that stuff,
Yeah, you
gotta have a book in one hand while you're cooking dinner.
That's right. Yeah, and then I've always read the church magazines too. We've always had a subscription to them.
So are you glad things have slowed down? Now there's less kids around and a little less chaos, a little less, don't have to quite just every day keep trying to push your kids to learn and stuff.
Yeah.
Is it kind of nice?
It is. It's a little, It is nice to be in this stage. It was hard a lot of the time to homeschool and try to keep up with everything, but it also had great joys and great, just, there were great blessings is probably a good way to put it from it. It is nice though to have the house to where it's quiet for time to study, and of course when the grandkids come, then it kind of goes all chaos again. That's awesome. I love it. But then they leave, and so you just pick up the aftermath, and then it's all calmed down again. Where that used to be a 24-hour thing, now it's just an occasion. They come and they're here and everything's chaos and we're having a bunch of fun, and then they go and it's quiet again, and it's a nice stage to be in. So, but yeah, it gives me the time. I try to take the time to continue that routine of reading and all of that, taking care of myself. So,
well, thanks for coming on to the podcast and taking some time out of your day to hop on your son's podcast. Like I said, she's probably the biggest viewer. I know I'm not saying that to offend my other viewers out there, but I'm pretty sure my mom is my biggest supporter. So
well, that's our job. We're the biggest supporters and cheerleaders of our children. That's what we do, and we love it.
That's true.
So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story with homeschooling.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have you on again sometime too.
Sure, I'd be glad to.
And hopefully this podcast can come find some ears of some people that need to hear it. And, maybe you've been thinking about starting homeschooling and you're not sure about it. Maybe this podcast will help give you some ideas. So.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So thank you guys so much for tuning into today's podcast. I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I look forward to seeing you in future podcast episodes. And as always, peace be unto you.